Hello there, and welcome back to FPL Heritage, where we explore the why behind better FPL decisions. If you're new here, my name's FPL Heritage, and every week we'll be using history, statistics, and strategy to help build stronger Fantasy Premier League teams. Last week, we spoke about team structure, whether premium players are actually worth their price, and how understanding FPL history can help us make better decisions in the future. If you haven't seen that video yet, I definitely recommend watching it after this one because it will give you a bit more context and better understanding of why this team is being built the way it is. But today, we're moving away from structure and focusing on the players themselves. Who offers genuine value, who's overpriced, who's flying under the radar, and who has become that crucial word essential for game week 1. Now let's start with Liverpool. Dominic Szoboszlai versus Florian Wirtz. I generally think this is one of the biggest decisions in FPL heading into game week 1. When Liverpool signed Florian Wirtz, many managers immediately assumed he'd become the standout Liverpool midfielder, and I know no one is convinced by that. Because standing in his way is actually Dominic Szoboszlai, and I honestly think he's one of the best value midfielders in the entire game. At just £7 million, he's currently owned by around 48% of all FPL managers, so clearly I'm not the only one that thinks like that. But sometimes players become highly owned because they've simply earned it. Last season, Szoboszlai scored 6 Premier League goals, provided 7 assists, and finished on 160 Fantasy Premier League points. He wasn't just producing moments of magic, he was consistently influencing games. And that's exactly what we want in FPL. I'm sure Arsenal fans haven't forgotten that thunderbolt of a free kick. Moments like that remind us of the quality he possesses. But what impressed me most wasn't the spectacular goals, it was the consistency at which he was doing it. Week after week, he was involved. Week after week, he looked capable of delivering attacking returns, and that trend has already continued into pre-season. Across Liverpool's opening 2 matches, he's already picked up a goal and 2 assists. He looks sharp, he looks confident, and perhaps most importantly, he looks central to everything Liverpool are doing. Under Iraola, I'm pretty sure that he won't be playing right back as much as he did last season, so there's also potential for getting even more attacking returns than he had last season. Now let's compare that to Florian Wirtz. Liverpool invested heavily to bring him in, and naturally expectations were enormous. His first Premier League season didn't quite live up to those expectations. 5 goals, 4 assists. Not disastrous numbers, but definitely below what fantasy managers, and especially Liverpool fans, were hoping for. However, I wouldn't write him off just yet. Iraola has already suggested that he sees Wirtz primarily as Liverpool's number 10. If that's where he settles, we could see a very different player this season. He's also had a shorter preseason after his extended World Cup campaign, so I don't think it's fair to judge him too early. For me though, if I were picking today, I'm going Szoboszlai. He's cheaper, he's proven, he's in form, and right now, I simply trust him more. Now let's move over to Manchester City, because I honestly think this is where some of the biggest bargains in FPL could emerge. Let's start with Phil Foden. The conversation around Phil Foden has never been around his talent. We all know how gifted he is. We've seen him produce elite fantasy seasons and fantasy numbers before. The real question has always been his minutes. Pep Guardiola's rotation, Pep Roulette, made him one of the most frustrating assets in the game. One week he'd score a brace, the next he'd be on the bench. But this season feels like it could be different for Phil Foden. With Enzo Maresca now in charge, there are already signs that Foden will have a much bigger role in Manchester City. Maresca has described him as one of the pillars of his project, and we even saw him captain Manchester City in their latest pre-season match. At £7 million, Foden suddenly feels like one of the highest upside picks in the game. If he does get consistent minutes, we know exactly what he's capable of. Now let's talk Antoine Semenyo. Last season he proved he wasn't simply a Bournemouth player benefiting from one good system that flowed directly through him. After his move to Manchester City, he continued producing week after week. He finished the campaign with 17 Premier League goals and 6 assists. And one thing I learned personally was not to overthink it. Last season, I tried chasing differentials. I looked at players like Ryan Cherky. Meanwhile, Semenyo just kept returning. Sometimes consistency is more valuable than chasing the next big thing. Even in City's latest pre-season match against Inter, he looked their biggest attacking threat. 2 shots, 1 big chance missed, 4 successful dribbles from 5 attempts, and an assist. Those underlying performances are exactly what I like to see. If he carries that momentum into game week 1, he'll prove to be very difficult to ignore. But at £8.5 million, that's a big chunk of the budget and a lot more expensive than the likes of Foden and the next player I'm about to talk about. Now let's move on to Elliot Anderson. If there was one player that content creators seemed to love last season, it was Anderson. And to be fair to them, they had good reason. He wasn't simply just picking up goals and assists. He was an absolute machine for defensive contribution points. Now, if you watched my first video, you'll know I think defensive contribution points are still one of the most overlooked parts of Fantasy Premier League. It's because they're not flashy. They're not talked about very often. But over the course of a season, they can make a huge difference. Anderson regularly reached the defensive contribution threshold before half-time. That's incredibly valuable. He finished last season with 180 fantasy points, 4 goals and 5 assists. Now that Manchester City have invested heavily in him, and with Rodri potentially leaving to Madrid, there's a real opportunity for Anderson to become a key part of Maresca's midfield. Yes, he's competing with the likes of Dewsbury Hall and Harry Wilson, who have a much bigger goal threat and assist potential. But if you're looking for reliability, consistency, and a player who can quietly take over points every single week, I generally think Anderson is one of the safest £6.5 million midfielders in the game. Next comparison isn't about price points, because Bryan Mbeumo and Matheus Cunha are both sitting at £8 million. It's about deciding whether you want to invest your budget, and this really comes back to team structure. If you watched last week's video, you'll know exactly what I mean. Personally, I really like Manchester United's opening fixtures, away to Hull City, home to Ipswich Town. You can't really ask for a better set of 2 fixtures to start the season. They're the kind of fixtures where I genuinely see Manchester United starting strongly, which naturally brings us on to Mbeumo and Cunha. Let's start with Cunha. He's direct, he's energetic, he's always looking to drive at defenders, and he's a massive goal threat. If United click early under Carrick, Cunha could quickly become one of the standout mid-price forwards in the game. Then there's Mbeumo. Year after year, he continues to deliver. At Brentford, he was on penalties and scoring goals. Now that he's at United, he's got his creative side, but he's still scoring those goals. And he's one of those players who seems capable of returning points against anyone. Personally, I don't think there's a wrong answer here. It really depends on how you've built your squad. And if you've already invested in Bruno Fernandes, which I think many of us have because of United's early fixtures, doubling up with Cunha and Mbeumo suddenly becomes a very attractive option. If you're looking for reliability, Mbeumo becomes difficult to ignore. But if you're looking for firepower, Cunha's definitely got that in his locker too. Finally, let's talk about the £9.5 million midfielders, Cole Palmer and Bukayo Saka, players we already know are capable of producing huge fantasy scores. I already talked in my first video about Cole Palmer being one of few players that have the potential to have explosive hauls, which we know to love. There's absolutely no questioning his ability. Last season though, injuries disrupted his rhythm and Chelsea never quite found that consistency. Now, under Xabi Alonso, Chelsea enter a completely new chapter. Personally, I'd rather watch how they start the season before committing such a significant amount of my budget. It's not about doubting Palmer, it's simply about timing. Then there's Bukayo Saka. Again, nobody's questioning his ability, but after a demanding season with Arsenal and a World Cup campaign that lasted until the semi-finals, I thought he looked a little hampered physically. Maybe he'll be absolutely fine by game week 1. I hope he is. But even if there's a small doubt over his fitness, I'd rather gather a little bit more information before making that investment. And that's what FPL Heritage is all about. Not chasing hype, not reacting emotionally, making better decisions using the information we have available. So, now looking at all of those players, let's see where my Game Week 1 draft currently stands. Let's start in goal with Kinski. At his price, I think he's one of the most interesting goalkeeper options available. Spurs have looked much more organised defensively under De Zerbi during pre-season, and if that carries into the league, I think Kinski has a real opportunity to offer value. Clean sheets are fantastic, but save points can often make the difference. As you can see from the graphic, I've activated Bench Boost. I didn't want the cheapest possible backup goalkeeper. Verbruggen gives me someone who's capable of returning points if Brighton keep a clean sheet. Normally I'd probably spend a less here, but Bench Boost changes the way that you build your squad. Jake O'Brien, I think he's slightly under the radar. He's a threat from set pieces, he's strong in the air, and I think he offers excellent value for his price at $5 million. Crystal Palace at home isn't the easiest fixture, but over the opening run I'm expecting him to steadily tick over points. Levi Colwill had a horrific injury last season, but he's just one of those players who probably won't excite many managers. I like defenders that are nailed. Chelsea's fixtures are decent to start with, and if Alonso can tighten them up defensively, I think Colwill could quietly become one of the better value defenders in the game. I've already spoken about Gabriel on the channel, but Calafiori offers a slightly different route into Arsenal's defence. And by different route, I just mean cheaper. When he plays, he likes to get forward and he's comfortable carrying the ball in attacking areas. If Arsenal continue being one of the best defensive teams in the league, I think owning one of their defenders remains a very sensible strategy. Luke Shaw is probably the biggest gamble in my defence. The quality has never been in question. It's simply about staying fit. Last season was fantastic for him, but if he can remain available, I genuinely think he could be one of the biggest bargains in the season. Manchester United's opening fixtures are one of the big reasons why he's currently in my draft. I've spoken about Anderson before, and I still think he's one of the biggest bargains in fantasy. His defensive contribution points last season were absolutely incredible. He's exactly the type of player that I love, reliable, consistent, always involved. If he settles quickly at City, I think he'll justify his price very comfortably. Dominic Szoboszlai, again, I've already explained why I currently prefer Szoboszlai over Wirtz. He's proven, he's cheaper, he's already started pre-season brilliantly. At £7 million, I honestly think he's one of the easiest picks in the game. This is when my faith in United's fixtures really start to show. Cunha brings relentless energy, he presses, he runs it behind, he creates opportunities, he's a massive goal threat. If United hit the ground running, I can absolutely see him becoming one of the highest owned midfielders very quickly. And for me, Bruno Fernandes is almost impossible to ignore, and that's only because of United's early fixtures. Everything creative goes through him. Set pieces, penalties, chances created, even DEFCON. I don't need to talk about how good Bruno Fernandes actually is. When United play well, Bruno usually returns. I didn't have him in my earlier draft, but looking at those opening fixtures, I'm more than happy doubling up with Bruno and Cunha. Haaland remains for my first draft. Again, doesn't need much explaining. He's Erling Haaland. He's at home. He's my captain. Could 15.5 million prove expensive over the course of the season? Absolutely. But for game week 1, I don't want to be hiding behind the sofa if Manchester City score 3 or 4. So now my £6 million forward spot. In my previous draft, it was Dominic Solanke. Now it's Brian Brobby. I like his physicality. I like his movement. He's got Ipswich away in his first game week, which obviously I love. He's definitely one I'll continue monitoring throughout pre-season, but I think he could offer fantastic value. The type of bench boost player I want, capable of clean sheets, capable of attacking returns, and most importantly, nailed on to start. Gross, because I'm bench boosting, I don't want passengers on the bench. Every player needs to be capable of returning points. Now that with Danny Welbeck out of the picture, Gross has the potential for penalties. He's also on set pieces. Hopefully we can get an attacking return. That's the whole strategy. Calvert-Lewin, normally I never spend this much on a third striker, but bench boost completely changes this equation. I know Calvert-Lewin plays against Nottingham Forest, so maybe that can change to Dominic Solanke. I'd much rather have someone capable of scoring than a £4.5 million dud who never leaves the bench. So why bench boost in game week 1? Well, most managers save it for a double game week, and that's an absolute valid strategy. But later in the season, you'll often have injuries, rotation, European fixtures, players needing rest. By contrast, in game week 1, almost everyone is fit. Almost everyone is available. And because of this season's pricing, I actually think it's possible to build a full squad of 15 players who can all realistically score points. If that happens, why not take advantage? Will it work? Time will tell. But I think it's definitely worth considering and exploring. So there we have it. That's my current game week 1 draft. As always, it's far from final. We've still got pre-season, transfers, injuries, and press conferences to get through. Vinicius Jr., here we go. Maybe we get that too. But based on everything we know today, this is the squad I'm happiest with. Now I'd love to hear from you. What do you think of the team? Would you make any changes? Who's the one player you think absolutely has to be in every game week 1 squad? Do you agree with my reasoning? And here's the question I really want to ask. Would you use your bench boost in game week 1, or are you saving it for a double game week later in the season? Let me know your thinking down in the comments below, because I genuinely love to hear your reasoning. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join the FPL Heritage community. This has been FPL Heritage, where we explore the why behind better FPL decisions. Remember, don't chase points, build better decisions. And I'll see you soon.